In this video, you're going to learn how to build this in Bubble completely without code. This is a task manager. We're going to look at setting up tasks, subtasks, as well as working with drag and drop sorting and prioritization, and creating due dates so that you can set up important notifications and reminders. And we're going to break this all down. We'll look at the database structure, the page layouts for the interface, and of course, all of the workflow logic in between. We're going to get started by setting up and managing your tasks and subtasks. Let's jump in. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some key components here for creating and editing tasks within the context of our example application. So I'll take you through the front end experience first so you have some context, and then we'll jump into the editor. So when a user in our design here clicks on this blue new task button, it's going to automatically add a new line here in our dynamic list of tasks. I can add a task name, let's say order textbooks. Okay. And that'll save the name to the database. And then I can also set a due date with this date picker. So let's choose a date in the future. We have some calculations here to let us know, with human-friendly terms, how far away that due date is. You can also see that if there's anything that's overdue, the language changes as well. We can also set up reminders for the task. We'll go over this feature in more detail a little later in this video. And we can also assign a tag to the task. So I have currently family, personal, and work tags, and I can change those by managing tags here. There's a text there that I've set up to show this pop-up, and I can add whatever custom tags I want. You can think of this as more like a categorization system for your tasks. So I'm just deleting those three there. Now to create subtasks, what I'm doing in my design is I'm clicking on this yellow arrow, and it changes the data source of the list that we're displaying here. So this is a brand new task, so I don't have any subtasks. I'm going to create my first one by clicking on this button. You notice that I have some visual cues. I changed the colors. I have this breadcrumb navigation that started here at the top to let me know that I'm now in a subtask view. So I've created my first subtask. I'm going to create a name for it. We'll say subtask A. I can do a second one here. We'll call this subtask B. And I'm going to show you, if I go again one more level down, I'm going to click on the arrow here for subtask A. Notice my breadcrumb design and my display has changed. So now I'm creating a subtask within subtask A. In other words, a subtask of the order textbooks, right? So we can call this subtask A1, something like that. All right, so I can go as many layers deep as I want because we've created sort of an infinite relationship structure with the database, and I'll show you how that works here. But it allows the user to go, into a very nested hierarchy tree if they want. Now I can back out of this, so by clicking on this back arrow, I go back up the chain. Right? Notice there's a number 1 here to show me that I have one subtask within this task here. Go back up one more. And again, with my primary task, we can see that there's 2 immediate subtasks within it. Okay. Now, all of these little design indicators, these were decisions that we made for our demo. You can, of course, design things however you need for your use case. The key things really to understand is how you're going to organize the data behind the scenes so that you can then display things however you want on the front end. All right. We can also delete our tasks. I have an icon here that I'll click on, this little trash can. It'll show a pop-up, and this is a way to confirm the action just so that we don't have any accidental deletes. I can back out of this by clicking on keep. Nothing changes. We just hide the pop-up. Or I can go ahead and click on delete, and that'll delete not just the task, but all of the subtasks down the chain for that, that lineage there, so that they are removed from the database completely. Okay, everything else remains untouched here. All right, so I'm in the editor now, so we can take a look at the data structure. Everything that I just demonstrated is using this data type right here, task. Now notice that I don't have a separate data type called subtask. Everything, at the end of the day, no matter where it is in the hierarchy, is ultimately going to be a task record. It's just a matter of relationships and how you present your design, where you can create this effect of just a never-ending tree of tasks and subtasks, okay? So I'll go through these fields here so you can understand the format, why we made these decisions, and you can apply whatever's going to make the most sense to your use case. So I have 2 date fields here, one for the completion of the task and one for the actual due date. So I have a feature here where if I check this box, it's going to mark it as complete. You see how it went away from this list because I'm currently filtered on incomplete only. I'm going to change this over to show all. Okay, so now I can see the 2 tasks that I have here that were completed. We have a completion date that was saved there for us. And then of course the due date as well. So those are going to be 2 separate fields. I have a name field, which is just a text here for the actual name of the task. I have a relationship to a user, which I've called owner, so that we can sort of assign the task to somebody. This is very helpful if you're working in a collaborative environment, gives you a lot of flexibility over privacy rules and restrictions. And I have a relationship to what I'm calling a parent task. Notice that the type of field here is task. It's not a text, right? It's not the name of another task. It's actually a link to another task. So when you set up a new field and you give it a custom name here, the format of the field type is really important. You can do generic field types like text, number, dates, or you can do relationships to other records of the same data type or even of other data types, like we saw with the owner, which is a relationship to a user. So tying one task to another just means we have a field that relates to a task record, okay? And notice also that we don't have a relationship to the child task, right? Potential children of this one record here. And that's because we want to make it so that it's more scalable for really large tasks. If they have, dozens or, hundreds of subtasks and, you have many items down the line, that you're not increasing the overall size of the record and create kind of a performance issue there. The most important thing is having that one-to-one relationship between the child and its parent. This field is really bare minimum for getting this. Now, you can, of course, have a list field to tie to all the children if you know that those subtasks lists are going to be more contained. If there's not going to be very many items, then it can definitely give you some flexibility with some of your logic. All right, so we've chosen to leave that out for performance. So this next field here is a relationship to a tag record. So that's our categorization option here. Now you can also make this a list of tags if you want, so that tasks can fall under multiple categories. Again, be mindful of the number of items in any one list. Same thing here, we've got a relationship to a list of reminders. Now, we were comfortable here doing a list because for reminders, we're only allowing up to 4 reminders to be enabled for any one task. So that's a very small list here, and it does give us some shortcuts and flexibility for our logic whenever we are making use of these reminders. Again, we'll go over that feature a little later in this video. We have a number field to create custom sort order, sequencing for our list here. So let me go back to the incomplete. So if I were to move launch marketing campaign into the second position, I can drag and drop. And what's happening behind the scenes is that it's going to update these sort order numbers so that, if I were to leave and come back to the app, everything still shows in my custom sort order and not necessarily the creation date of the tasks. This last number field, this subtask count, this is what's allowing us to show these numbers here to display the number of immediate subtasks within the task that we're looking at in the row. And that is another efficiency decision there. We don't want to have to search for subtasks every time or rely on a really large list field. So by having this calculation that only gets updated whenever a new subtask is added or removed, then we have a number to display much more efficiently. The tag data type is really simple. It's just got a name field. That's all we're going to save to it in our design here. You can, of course, expand on this if you wanted to add color coding, have a color picker associated with this and a hex code so that wherever you display the design of the tag, you can also show a dynamic color. Now, moving into the design side of things, I'm going to walk you through just the key visual elements and workflows so that all of your logic is in the right spot to save things properly, and you can see where you have flexibility and room for creativity to design, how you want to display this information. The primary element that has most of the logic is this repeating group here. This is where you're going to display your dynamic list. You can use a table element if you want. Both will get the job done in terms of displaying a dynamic list. So the setup of our repeating group, let me open this up here, is the type of content is task and the data source is a search for tasks. So we're searching the database here, right? Every user who's coming into the application is going to have their own set of tasks. So you have some room here to create some constraints, enforce whatever user permissions you want. I've designed this so that by default, we're going to display all incomplete tasks only, and we're going to start at the top of our hierarchy. So we're only interested in tasks where there is no parent associated, right? So these are the tasks that are the most parent and where the completion date is empty. We're also going to sort by the user's custom sort order number field, okay? So it's not necessarily going to be in the order that the task was created. All right, now inside of this repeating group, we also have a number of other groups and all sorts of inputs and icons for the user to interact with. We will be touching on the drag and drop functionality a little later in this video, but the first thing that I want to call out here is this input for the user to edit the task name. Notice that this text input here is auto-binding to the name field of the parent task. The parent task being the cells task, right? A repeating group is going to dynamically create rows or cells really for every task that comes back from that search. All right, so this input is going to auto bind whatever value is typed in here to the cells task record. So if I type in a name, it automatically writes that text value to that record. For auto binding to be enabled, you do need to have a privacy rule set up. So you can do that in the data tab under the privacy subtab and make sure that you choose the data type that you're working with. In this case, we're working with the task type. And I've created this rule here. As long as the task's owner, right, that's my custom user field, is the same as the current user, okay, so I'm looking at my task, then not only can I find this task in searches and view all of the fields, but I can also auto bind on these fields here that we see the check mark enabled for them, right? Name, due date, and related tag. I also have a date time picker here so that the user can set a due date. Notice that this is also auto binding to the due date field, right? Now over on the right, I have a drop down to auto bind to the related tag field. Now drop down is sort of similar to a repeating group in that it also works with a list of items and you can pull from a dynamic data source such as your database, and that's exactly what we're doing here. This is going to be a list of dynamic choices from our tag data type and the exact source itself, right? Which tags do we want to show? We can customize here. I could do a search of tags, but I'm actually doing that already in another element on this page, and so I'm sort of piggybacking off of that. If I right-click this expression, this says RG tags list of tags. Well, where is this repeating group? I'm going to right-click, click on reveal the element. This is a repeating group inside of this pop-up. Okay, and I'm actually going to show you where this pop-up shows up on the front end. I have this text here that says manage tags. If I click on it, shows my pop-up and it has a repeating group that's displaying all of the tags in the system. I can create a new one, right? Let's say we create a new tag called sports. Okay, that's going to automatically save it. You can see it's sorting alphabetically here. I'm going to close this and I can see from my filter, I have sports there now. If I wanted to change which tag the task is related to, I can change it there because now it's a record in the system. But the point I want to make here is that in this pop-up, I have this repeating group to pull all the tags from the database. I am doing the search that I need to also populate this drop-downs list as well. I do not need to do another search. I could, but it would be inefficient, right? I would be using extra workload units that are just not necessary. We want to cut down on the number of times you're doing redundant searches to make things more efficient long term. So this is simply piggybacking off of the repeating group in the pop-up because it's the exact same data source. Okay, I just want whatever list of tags is there, I want that to appear here as well. All right, so now I'm going to walk you through navigating through the tasks and subtasks. We're actually going to be leveraging a custom state to keep track of our pathway. So remember, if I click on from the first level here, on the subtask arrow for develop new feature for app, okay, we're going to see that parent task listed at the top, and now I'm looking at a different list of tasks. These are strictly the subtasks immediately within that first parent. And I can click on another arrow and we can see this breadcrumb trail is keeping track of our pathway, and I can keep going down, right, and it's going to keep keeping track, and my data sources change within the repeating group here. So the custom state that I'm using to keep track of the list of tasks I'm moving through, I have that living on my group main. This is my primary container at the top level of my page structure here. So if I open up the inspector, here's my custom state. I've called it breadcrumb. This is a list of tasks. Okay, so whenever I click on the arrow icon, several things are going to happen, but the very first is to update this custom state. So we're going to set the custom state to whatever the list is currently. Okay, so I'm referencing the state itself, group mains breadcrumb, and I'm adding, right, with the plus item operator, I'm adding the parent group's task. So it just tacks on every time I click on this, it adds that most recent task to it. Okay, and that custom state is actually what we're displaying here in this text. under a condition. By default, this is just going to say tasks, but the condition is, if the list is currently, okay, so I'm referencing the state itself, group mains breadcrumb, and I'm adding the parent group's task. So it just tacks on every time I click on this, it adds that most recent task to it. Okay, and that custom state is actually what we're displaying here in this text under a condition. By default, this is just going to say tasks, If we can see that there is at least one item in that custom state, we know that the user has traveled at least one level down to see the first level of subtasks. Okay, and so under this condition, we'll change the color of the text for that visual cue, and we will display the breadcrumb value, which is a list of tasks, but not just, the objects themselves, specifically the names of each task, right? Because a list of tasks is a list of records. So we want to go to something that's actually printable. So we're going to go to the list of names, which is a list of texts, and I'm going to override what would otherwise just be a comma separation that Bubble would do by default. I'm going to override the comma with a right arrow instead, just for design purposes here. So I'm going to use Bubble's join with operator, which you can use when you follow a list of something here. And I've just typed in the right arrow. And that way we get this display right here. Now, the next thing we have happening in this workflow off of the arrow click is we're actually going to trigger our search flow. I actually have a whole other folder specifically for all the functionality around search. Navigating through the subtasks is going to be a part of that flow because the user could be filtering specifically on a list of subtasks. They could be moving back up the chain. We are modifying the data source no matter what we're touching here, whether it's the completion status, the due date, the tags, and what level we're in. So it is a part of our search flow. So I'm going to walk you through how we've set up our daisy chain search system, and you'll see how this breadcrumb feature, this custom state, also feeds into that and therefore affects the display of the repeating group. All of these things here are connected with one another. So this daisy chain system works like this. Anything that could possibly update the data source, whether it is a change to any one of these dropdowns or moving into a subtask level, is going to reset the data source of that repeating group, right? The repeating group that shows us all of our tasks here. So we have multiple triggers. If this icon is clicked, if the due date dropdown is changed, if the status is changed, notice that they're all triggering the exact same action here, right? All of these different triggers are triggering the first step in our search flow, which is a custom event that I've called step 0, reset. Okay, custom events you can create from this custom category right there, create a custom event. They are always triggered by other workflows. That's exactly what we're doing from these input changes. We've run a custom event action called trigger a custom event, and I've just selected that first one. Notice that I've numbered them to make it really easy for me to keep track of the sequence here, okay, because Bubble will display them in numerical order like that. So all of the triggers, including my subtask, again, is going to start us with this first reset event. So this event is going to do two things. First thing is we're going to reset the data source of our repeating group back to that default state where the parent task is empty and we're sorting by the sort order. Notice that we don't actually have the completion date as a constraint here anymore because it's possible that the user may actually want to filter on that differently. So we're leaving that out and we will be addressing it in subsequent steps here within our search daisy chain flow. So this is our starting point for our list of tasks. Now immediately after resetting that, we're going to trigger the next step. Okay, so this is another trigger action to trigger the next custom event that I've created called step 1, breadcrumb. And this is where we'll actually incorporate any updates to the breadcrumb custom state, which would have only happened if we clicked on the arrow. Remember, this is where we update the custom state here. So the first action within the breadcrumb event is to, again, update the repeating group. We're using the display list action. If you've never updated a repeating group before, it's this action right here, display list, that changes the data source programmatically. Now we're only going to do this if we do see that there's at least one item in the breadcrumb. So there's a condition, right? Same condition that we actually had on that text to, change the color to yellow. So if group main's breadcrumb first item is not empty, then we know we have more information to update that list again. And if it's true, right, if this condition passes, we're actually going to do a new search. Okay, so we're going to search for tasks where the parent task is the last item of the breadcrumb. Remember, we want to, when we're navigating through these views, we're looking at the last level of the pathway that we've just taken. Okay, so here I'm going to go back 1. If I click on this arrow here for identify test users, I now want to change the data source of this repeating group to any subtasks whose parent is identify test users. Okay, and so here I currently have 1 for that. So again, we're searching for tasks where the parent is the last item in the breadcrumb. Okay, then we're going to trigger the next step in our search. If there is no breadcrumb item, we're staying in that top level, it's just going to skip over this action and move on to the next custom state. So you see this daisy chain thing happening here. It is going to try to run all of these functions within the custom events, but it may not, depending on what the user has indicated with their filters. Okay, so we can take care of every possible combination that the user may want to run for their filter choices. So the next step here is status. We do have two different ones. I'll explain here in a second. So if the status is incomplete, right, if that's what they chose for the dropdown, we're going to take the existing list of tasks and filter them based on that completion field being empty. Versus if they chose specifically complete only, and these are static choices, I've just typed in those texts into the dropdown, then we're going to change it so that completion isn't empty, right? I'm only looking for the items I've completed. If they chose show all, right, that's my third option here, then we don't need to filter further. We're going to go off of whatever came previously in the daisy chain because the user doesn't need to filter on the completion status. So we don't have a third action for that option. It's just going to skip over these first two steps and move on to triggering the next event. The next event is for the keywords. This is for when the user types in a search term here. Let me go back to the beginning so you can see an example. So let's say I have redesigned website for campaign. Okay, and if I type in the word campaign, then we're going to see these two items show up because they're matching that keyword there. So here in our custom event, we're again going to update the data source based on the existing list. Notice that I'm not doing a search here. The existing list, just filtering it further. Now it's based on the keyword. So if the name of the task contains keywords, this is an operator that Bubble has for text fields, the keywords being whatever the value of our search input is. Okay, that's this expression right here, then that's a task we're going to keep in the list. Again, only if they typed anything into that input do we care to run this action. So we have a condition there, as long as that value is not empty. Then we move on to the next one, which is for tags. Okay, again, updating the repeating group source only if the user selected something in the dropdown. That's the dropdown in our filter up above. Okay, it's not the one within the cell. It's these up here can trigger our daisy chain. Right, so if there's something there, then we will again filter our list further based on the related tag field equaling the value of that dropdown. And then our final custom event is based off of the date. Okay, so here, if the dropdown date filter's value is not empty, we will filter once more on the list of tasks based on the due date. Now, I actually have hidden start and end date pickers to help me create custom ranges. The way that I've designed this is to give the user a very user-friendly list of choices so that they don't actually have to open up a calendar and calculate what's within the next 7 days, what's overdue, what's in the next month. We're doing that behind the scenes for them. So for example, if I choose in the next 7 days, I have a hidden start and end date picker that will do that calculation. We don't need to see it, but I am using those values in the expressions here. And I'll show you in our design. Here are our two elements, start and end. We never show these to the users, but you can see here I have conditions for all of our possible options. If the drop-down value that they selected is overdue versus today versus due tomorrow or due in the next 7 days, I'm specifically changing the initial content of the date and time picker to match that value, right? So due tomorrow means that for the start, it's going to be the current date and time rounded down to the beginning of the date, so midnight, plus 1 day. That's the beginning of tomorrow. And then for the end date, the end of tomorrow is actually 2 days from now, right? 2 days midnight. So we've done those ranges for all of the options there. Okay, so if you follow these actions here within the custom event, you'll notice that with every step, we are updating the data source of the repeating group. We're running this display list action, and that is how the view of the repeating group changes, because we're literally changing the data source away from the default. And if the user makes an adjustment, it's just going to start the process all over again from the start, right, with that baseline list of tasks and filter them down appropriately. We don't have conditions on the repeating group. We don't have multiple repeating groups. It's one repeating group element completely managed by this daisy chain system. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach for going from idea to app. So if you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, this is the workshop for you. We've got a lot of great stuff in there for you. So I've got the link on the screen right now and in the description below. All right, so now we're going to go through the workflows for creating and deleting our tasks and subtasks. We'll start with this blue button in the upper right corner. This is actually going to serve dual purpose for creating both parent level tasks and any level of subtask. So we don't have multiple buttons. We just have a condition to change the visual appearance if there is at least one item in the breadcrumb, letting us know that we are within some level of subtask here. So we change the label, the icon, and the color. Okay, so let's go over to the workflow for this button click. Two things are happening. We're creating a new task record in the database, as well as recalculating the subtask count if what we're creating is a subtask. So this is only, step 2 is only going to apply within the subtask scenario. So for creating a new task, this is just a data action, create a new thing. So you'll choose the task data type, and we're right out of the gate going to set potentially 4 fields here. 2 of them only apply for subtasks, but we'll start with the first one here, the sort order. So this is going to look at the full list of tasks in the view that we're in, and it's going to take each of the sort order numbers of those tasks and find the highest number and add 1 to it. So for example, if I'm in this view right here, this is the parent level of tasks. So I have 5 tasks. So this last one is going to be number 5. I'm adding 1 to it. If I create a new task from here, this is going to be sort order number 6. Okay, that's exactly what we're using that field for there. The next 2 fields are specifically for if we are currently creating a subtask. Okay, because the parent task relationship applies there. That's just going to be the last item in the breadcrumb. And then the related tag, this is more of a convenience for the user. We're just going to give the new subtask the same tag as its parent. Okay, the breadcrumb last items related tag. So again, just as an example, notice this task here, develop new feature for app, it's set to the work tag. So if I go into it and create a new subtask, it's automatically going to have the work tag. I can change it if I want, but we're going to assume that in most cases, the subtasks are going to be tagged the same way. Okay. And then we have the owner, which is just going to equal the current user. You can, of course, evolve this into more of a collaborative environment where users can change who the owner is or who the task is assigned to. So this is something that you have flexibility over. In step 2, we're going to make a change to the result of step 1's parent task. Again, this only applies if the result of step 1 is a new subtask. And we're just recalculating that count. So the only place we are using that count is in the design here, this number right here. Okay, so again, if I go into the list, I can see 5 total tasks for this parent task. And so that's the number right now. Now, if I go back in and I delete that last one, okay, that's also going to trigger a recalculation. We haven't seen that part of the workflow quite yet, but that's going to recalculate it, and now we're down to 4. Okay, so it's just to prevent having to do multiple searches within each of these cells if we have a big list of tasks, just to display that number. So this happens, this is a search here, but this is a search that's going to happen not as frequently. So we're searching for all of the subtasks of that parent. So by searching for tasks and filtering on that parent field, right, parent task equals this task meaning the record that we're modifying, then we'll just count up those records and that's our number, okay? So that's all we're doing for creating the task of whatever level. So those field relationships are really all we need, okay? Now let's look at deleting. The first step is really to show the pop-up. So from this icon, we're going to show our pop-up delete task. Okay, that's the one that we've designed right here. And this pop-up does have a type of content set to task so that it can receive a specific task record, right? The pop-up is sort of detached from the repeating group. It's not going to know automatically which cell you came from. So we need to change the data source every time we show this pop-up. And that's exactly what that step 2 here is when we click on the delete icon. This is to display data in that pop-up. And really what that means is we're changing the data source. Very similar to how we were updating the data source of the repeating group in our search daisy chain flow. So you can find this under element actions, display data. Okay, so you'll select your pop-up, and then the data to display in this case is the parent group's task. This is the parent group of that delete icon. So now that this pop-up has a data source, I can do things like showing the task name within this text here, just to give the user another confirmation that they're about to delete what they really want. Okay, now the delete button is really what kicks off the deletion process. Okay, so in this workflow, I'm doing two things. I'm actually scheduling a backend workflow to kick off a whole other sequence of deletion, because we're going to have to go through some looping to delete all of the subtasks, down the line from this parent task that we're trying to delete. And then we'll also hide the pop-up for the user just on the front end so that they have some visual that is all going through. Okay, so this action is really just to kick things off. This is a schedule API workflow action right here. And we're going to have this run right now, right as soon as we click on that button. There's no delay. And we are going to pass one piece of information to the backend workflow, which is the parent group's task. That way it has a reference point of where to start deleting, right? Because we don't want to delete everything, just where we are now and then all of its children. So in the backend workflows tab here, I have a new API workflow called delete tasks. You can create that by clicking on this box, general, new API workflow. This is just an internal name here, delete tasks. And here's where I set up that parameter so that it can receive that starting point, that initial reference task. So I've called it parent task, the type is task. Okay, again, that's what we're passing in over here. Okay, just so you know that, how these things are related. Okay, so this workflow is going to do a few things, and there is kind of a looping behavior that's happening here. So the first step is to trigger this deletion flow all over again for all children of the parent task that we're deleting. Okay, so this is a schedule on a list action, but we're triggering the exact same workflow. It's scheduling itself to run again, but now the perspective is going to be from the subtasks. Okay, so the list we're running on is a list of tasks whose parent is the incoming parent task. But when it's their turn to run through that delete flow, they are now the parent task, right? You see here it says this task. So if there's 10 subtasks, this is going to run 10 times, but each value for this parent task parameter is going to be a different subtask. And they really become the new parent task because they could also have children, right? So this is only going to run as long as the parent task subtask count is greater than 0. This tells us there's that we should even bother with moving forward with this action and performing this search. If the parent task that we're about to delete does not have any children, right, if the subtask count is 0, then this first step gets skipped. The second step is going to update the subtask count of its parent because it's about to be deleted, right? Not the parent, but the task that the user wants to delete. Right, so if I go to, we just saw this example, right? I was within the subtask here of develop new feature for app. I deleted one of the subtasks, so it had to go back up to the parent, develop new feature for app, to recalculate this number. Okay, and so that's what this step 2 is doing. It's taking the task in question that's about to be deleted, go to its parent and recalculate the subtask. By doing that same expression that I showed you earlier, we're searching for tasks with the parent task constraint. We're going to exclude the value of the parameter because we're about to delete it, so we don't want to count it, and we'll count the remaining items. And then the final step is to actually delete the task in question. We need this to happen at the very end because we are referencing this in our steps 1 and 2. Okay, so this step 1 is really our looping logic. If you have 5 levels of subtasks, every time a new task comes through this, if it has its own subtask count that's greater than 0, it will trigger this on the list of its own children. And it will keep going until it hits no more tasks with subtasks. When we hit the end of the line, eventually it'll stop scheduling API workflows, and eventually all of them will be deleted. All right, so now that you have a system for creating your task records in the database, now we're going to look at getting a bit more interactive with them in the front end UI. we're going to put together a drag and drop system for sorting your tasks and subtasks. This will involve a plugin, but we'll walk you right through it so that you can see exactly how to implement this in your app. All right, so this is what the drag and drop sorting feature looks like for the user on the front end. We have this icon that the user can grab. When they pick it up, they click on it and hold it, and they can move the task around. And you can see as I move in between tasks, this drop zone appears and it says move task here. So let's say that I move this plan team offsite task that I'm holding right now in between the first two tasks, right over here. So if I drop this, what's really happening behind the scenes is that we're updating the sort order number for every record involved in this change. And so the repeating group will readjust itself to display those tasks in that order. So if we go into the database here, let me refresh this view. Okay, so you see how plan team offsite was moved from the position it was in previously to now the new number 2. Let's do that one more time here. I'm going to move prepare quarterly financial report from the final position, right? This is in position 5 here, and let's move it after plan team offsite. Okay, so prepare quarter financial report should be now number 3 when I drop it. Okay, and you can see that develop new feature, redesign website, those are pushed forward by 1. Redesign website is going to be the new number 5. So let me refresh this here, just like this. Okay, so you see how those the numbering here matches what we're seeing on the front end design. Okay, so the plugin that we're using to help us with the actual drag and drop interaction is this one right here, Draggable Elements. This is a Bubble plugin. It's free, and note that it does come with a few different components. We have 2 different types of elements. We have a drag and drop group, and we also have a drop area. The drag and drop group is the thing that you can pick up and move around. The drop area is the sort of landing zone that you will drop that draggable group onto, which can also trigger a workflow. And that is this event right here. A drop area has a group dropped onto it, so it'll recognize when a draggable group is placed on it. You also have an action here to programmatically move draggable groups. We're not using this action, but it is something that comes with the plugin. Okay, so in our workflows, we have a folder here for 2 different versions of this dropping behavior, because the task could be moving from one of 2 directions. It could be moving from lower in the list to higher in the list, or in the reverse, from higher in the list to lower in the list. That does change the logic just a bit in order to adjust all of the sort order numbers for any tasks involved. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the logic here, because this is really where everything is done. Now, before we look at the workflows, I do want to show you how I've designed the elements here in our page. So inside of my repeating group of tasks, I'm going to show you the hierarchy. I have one regular group just for organization purposes, spacing, things like that. And then a drop area, which is a container technically, right? It's similar to a group. I have a drop area below that. So my repeating group is designed as a column so that these 2 elements stack, vertically, one above the other. Okay. The drop area I have, with the design, it has no background color. Well, it's matching the color of the primary group, right? It's a white color, so it looks invisible to us. And the height of this is 20 pixels, okay? Now, in the condition of this drop area, I'm changing certain things to make it more obvious to the user only when a draggable group is being dragged over it, right? So this is the condition. When this drop area is dragged over, we're going to change a few things. I'm going to turn this on so that you can see, right? So we have a slightly taller height, 40 pixels now. The background color has changed. I've also given it a border, this kind of dashed border here. And we will also reveal a text inside. There's this text here that says move task here. This is also visible under that same condition. Otherwise, it is not going to be visible. Okay, so we get this effect where when I move over that area, it sort of expands it just a little bit, make it easier for the user to drop something there, and visually make it super clear that that is the landing zone. But when we're not dragging, we kind of want to hide that. We don't want that always visible because it can be a bit noisy, right? A bit distracting. Okay, so there's our drop area, and the configuration of the drop area, you just want to make sure that the tolerance is set to intersect, which means that it will detect a drop as long as your draggable group is crossing over it. It doesn't necessarily need to fit perfectly inside of it. That's the other option here. Intersect is a little bit more forgiving. Okay. Now inside of my regular group here, which I've called group task, I'm going to open this up. Here I have several other groups. The first one, so this group task is set up as a row, okay? So we have several elements that are stacking horizontally. My first group is the draggable group. Note that I don't actually have the draggable group for the entire row. I really just have it for these first two icons and the input, because I feel like it is just a little bit cleaner. It's not as confusing when the user's moving things around. They really just need to see the task name. Then next to it, we have a group for the status and the date picker. We also have a group for the drop down and the delete icon. Now, what I'm doing for these other areas to the right side of this row is I'm actually hiding those groups when the draggable group is dragged, right? This one over here, it goes away temporarily. Same thing for this middle group. So you'll notice here, if I pick up launch marketing campaign, notice that everything, to the right of the input actually hides temporarily. As I'm dragging this over, I'll move it over here, right? So you can see it more clearly. I just see the icons and that input. Again, it's just for a little bit more clarity for the user. You'll also note that that group task also changes its background to a gray color as long as the draggable group is currently moving. And that's, again, just a visual to help the user understand where this task is coming from. So if I'm in a really big list and I'm moving things around, I have that gray background to let me know that's where it was. And then, of course, the drop zone changes as well when I move over them like that. Okay, now the configuration for the draggable group, we're going to make it droppable. Okay, so you want to check this box. That allows us to trigger a workflow. And the behavior post-drop, we're going to set this to move back. And also important to make sure that this draggable group has a type of content set to task, and the data source is the parent group's task, because we need a reference to the task being moved in our workflow. All right, so looking at the workflow, we have our two different events here, and these events are coming from this element event right here. A drop area has a group dropped onto it. This is the one that comes with the plugin. And I have two versions of it based on the direction that we're moving the task. So you can see I actually put an arrow icon here in the name so that it's very clear for me when I'm working with this. So for the first one, the up arrow, what we're talking about is, let me refresh the page here. I'm moving something from lower in the list, let's say develop new feature, to higher in the list. Okay, it would trigger that workflow. And then the other one is the opposite. So we do have to define, that direction ourselves. Bubble is not going to know that for us. So with this event, first thing is we want to set the type of thing to task, so it knows what type of data to receive. Okay, and the condition is going to be only when the current workflow's task, that's the task that is being moved, the task from the draggable group, when that task's sort order is currently greater than the current cell's index. And the index we're talking about here is the drop area's index. So if the task we're moving's sort order is greater than the index, then we trigger this flow. Okay, so this final task here, prepare quarterly financial report, that sort order number is currently 5. If I move it to in between the first two tasks, we're talking about index 1. Because remember that drop zone is technically inside of the repeating group cell. It's just at the, it's sort of hidden for us, but technically it is in a cell. It's not in between cells. It just looks like it's in between cells. So I'm moving this to index 1 here, and we'll run a workflow so that it still appears after the first one, right? We're going to add 1 to it. So if position 5 is greater than index 1, then we know that we're going to run this workflow here, versus the opposite. If the sort order is less than the index, right? So if I move this back down here, the sort order right now for this is 2, and I'm moving it down to index 4. Okay, then we run the other workflow because our logic is going to be reversed a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at the actions now here. So this is going to be from moving lower in the list to higher in the list. We're going to make a change to a list of all tasks that need to be pushed, right? Pushed forward. Okay, so if I, again, move from the final position to in between the first two, I'm actually changing all of the sort orders from, the second item, for, down below. All of those need to be pushed by 1. So notice that here's the actual change. Sort order equals this task's sort order plus 1. So the main thing here for this action, which is a make a change to a list, is we have to identify the right list. We don't want to make changes to anything that's not involved here. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the repeating groups list of tasks, and I'm filtering them based on their current sort order. They have to be in between the index that we're moving to and the sort order of the task that we're moving, right? This will identify that range of tasks that need to be affected. But I am also going to exclude the task that I'm moving because that's going to be changed specifically here in step 2. Remember, we're going to do index +1, okay, so that it actually appears after the index that we're moving to. All right, so I'm excluding by doing minus item the current workflow task, and then updating that task that we moved, that's the workflow task, separately to take the current index +1. Now our other workflow here is just the opposite. So here we're making a change to a list of tasks, identifying them properly, going to the list of tasks from the repeating group, filtering them by the sort order, these 2 sort order constraints so that we have that range. Okay, this is from between the current workflow task sort order and the current cells index, and we're actually going to include the index for this one. And then we're just subtracting 1. We're subtracting 1 so that everything gets pushed back by 1. And then of course the second action is to make a change to the task that we're moving, and this is just going to equal the current cell's index. Okay, so now we're going to incorporate some back-end workflows. We're going to get a little bit more advanced with our logic here. This way you can set up some important reminders or notifications for users whenever a task's due date is coming up or if it's already passed. If you're new to backend workflows, this is a fantastic feature to work with in order to get to know this area of the editor. All right, so the way that we're doing reminders in this app is the user will enable 1 or more email notifications to go out based on the due date of a task. Okay, so for example, this redesigned website for a campaign, they'll click on this bell icon. We're going to show a pop-up with the 4 possible reminder choices, and they can toggle on whichever ones they want to receive an email for. So maybe they want to know if it's due tomorrow, they'll turn that on. Also, if it's now overdue, they'll click on this icon to toggle it on. If they click on it again, it will switch it off and cancel that reminder from going out so that they don't get that email. Okay, now these 4 possible options are completely custom. You can do whatever sort of timing, frequency that you'd like. You also don't have to send an email if you want to display a message in the application directly in sort of a dashboard design. That's completely up to you as well. What I'm going to show you are the different components for scheduling some kind of an action to be taken, right, in order to create a reminder for the user. So we're going to use backend workflows for this, and also how to organize the information around a reminder per task, per reminder type. Okay, so let's go into the data structure so you can see what we're working with here. We have a data type called reminder. This is a separate record that gets created for every reminder being enabled for a task. So we have a relationship to the task and a relationship to the type of reminder. This is an option set with those 4 choices. Okay, so if I go over to the option set, these are the custom options that I've created. This is, again, where you can do whatever you want. The actual logic around the timing, right? 1 week equals 7 days, or due tomorrow means 1 day plus the due date, things like that. That's all going to happen in the workflows. This is more for the front end, user-friendly display of their options. And as long as there's a relationship of between that option and the reminder record, you'll have everything you need in order to apply the right date logic in the backend workflows so that things go out at the right time. We also have a text field here for the scheduled ID. This is going to be important, especially if we need to reschedule a reminder for a different time if the user changes the due date. Or cancel a reminder. They may decide to disable reminders. Or if the task gets completed early, we don't want those notifications to go out because they don't need them anymore. So having an ID in order to change things is really important here. Okay, and then the other part of our data structure here is within the task data type. Remember, we do have a relationship to a list of reminders. So every time one reminder gets created that they enable, it's going to also be added to that task's list. This is more for efficiency in our logic so that we can get to a specific task list without necessarily having to search through the entire table of reminders. Okay, now in our design for our pop-up here, this is our repeating group that displays the different types. Type of content is the option set. The source is going to be all of those choices from that option set. And we have an icon for toggling on and off. By default, it's in the off position. And in the condition, we're going to see if the task, right, the pop-ups tasks list of reminders list of types, okay, so every reminder has a type. If that list of types contains the current cells type, then we know that we've already enabled a reminder for this task for this type. So we're going to change the icon to the toggle on position. And if they disable it, they cancel it, then it will no longer pass the condition because the reminder will be removed and it will go back to the toggle off position. Okay, so in the workflow here, we have two events for enabling a reminder, that's the one in green here, and then for canceling the reminder, this one in red. Okay, now ultimately what we're enabling, you can see here, we're scheduling a backend workflow. So this is really just the trigger to kick things off. And our backend workflow, I'm going to switch over here in purple. This is the workflow that's going to take into account creating a reminder for the first time or making a change to an existing reminder. And because there are 4 different possible timing options, right? Due tomorrow, due in 1 week, that sort of thing, we do have separate actions for each of those so that we can be very specific with that logic. All right, so let's go back to the page level. I'm going to walk you through enabling a reminder first. So when that toggle is clicked and we can see that the tasks reminders from the pop-up, the pop-ups task reminders list of types doesn't contain the cells type, is the same condition on the icon, then we know that we don't have anything enabled, and so we're going to create it. So we're going to schedule that backend workflow, have it run immediately, current date and time, and there are 3 parameters that's going to receive information from the page so that the backend workflow is able to do what it needs to do. So if I go over to the backend workflow here, right, here are the 3 parameters. Reminder type is our option set, the task involved is our task data type, and optionally an existing reminder. So this is optional because this is only going to apply if we're modifying a reminder that is already in the database. If we're creating one for the first time, we don't pass anything in this parameter, and we need to tell Bubble that it's optional so that it allows an empty value for this parameter. Okay, otherwise it would return an error. All right, so in this case here with this green workflow, this is always going to be to create a reminder for the first time. So we don't have an existing reminder to send in. We'll leave that blank, but the reminder type is the cells type. Okay, again, remember we're coming from this repeating group here. This is a repeating group of reminder types. And we're also going to pass in the pop-ups task so we know which task is involved. Okay, so once we go over to, we're ready to create the reminder, our first step here is to create that record. And this is only when the reminder parameter is empty. That way we know that we need to create a brand new one. Okay, so we're referencing that parameter. The related task for this reminder is the incoming task. That's our next parameter. And then the type is the reminder type. That is our third parameter, right? So all of these connection pieces are feeding into our actions here. We don't need to go looking for them again. Step 2 is going to add the new reminder to the tasks list of reminders, right? There's that one-to-many relationship that we have there. Okay, so make a change to the task. The reminders list is going to add the result of step 1. Again, this is only in the event that there is no incoming reminder already. Okay, now steps 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all for the different reminder types. So only one of those would ever run per workflow here. So for example, step 3 is only going to run if the reminder type is due in 1 week, right? So we chose this here. Step 4 is only going to run if it's due tomorrow. Step 5, due today, and step 6, overdue. And the difference is the schedule date. You can see as I click between these actions, the schedule date is the thing that's changing. So for due in 1 week, the schedule date for sending a reminder email, that's another workflow that we have here with the actual email action. The schedule date is going to be the task's due date plus minus 7 days. This is how we subtract time from a specific date, right? Because we want the reminder to go out 7 days before it's due. So plus negative 7 days, okay? And for due tomorrow, this is going to be plus negative 1 day, right? 1 day out. For due today, we're just going to send it on the due date. And then for overdue, we're going to send it once it's 1 day past the due date, plus positive 1. Now, ultimately, what steps 3 through 6 are triggering is this workflow right here, which I've called send reminder email. Notice this is the only action, is just to send an email, and it needs to receive the reminder record. That's how it's going to have all the information it needs about the task, okay? And notice that there is a condition on this so that even if this is scheduled to go out at some time, it's still only going to run. It's going to do one final check, only going to run if the reminders related tasks completed field, that's that date field for when it was completed, is empty. Okay, meaning that it's only going to send the reminder as long as the task is still not complete. Okay, and so once we do pass that condition, now we can send the email to the reminders creator's email and the subject is going to say, you know, the task is overdue or due in 1 week or due tomorrow, because this is just displaying that type, right? That's why we've written it in this way so that it shows up easily in the subject line in a way that it makes sense, right? Task is, and then it'll say one of these here. All right, and so then in the body here for send email, we can customize whatever details we want to help the user understand what's coming up, what the task is. You know, any information that you want to display can come from the task itself or from the reminder record. All right, so here we're just showing all of that relevant info. Okay, so now back to the API workflow that does the scheduling of the reminder email. Notice that we have to pass over that reminder to it, that record. Now, the reminder could be brand new from step 1, or it can be existing, coming in from our reminder parameter. So we're, you know, just to help consolidate things and not have, you know, double the amount of workflow actions with all sorts of conditions, we're going to have an expression here that will insert either the new reminder from step 1 or the existing reminder coming from the parameter. So the way that I've done this here is I'm taking the result of step 1, that's the new reminder, converting that to a list. So it's a list of one item, and then adding to that list our existing reminder from our parameter and going to the first item. Because this workflow will only ever have one value for each of these things. We're either going to create a new one or we're going to have an existing. My expression is adding both together in a list, but I know that the list will only ever have one item. And so I'll go to the first item, and whichever one it is, that's what gets inserted. And that value is going to, that expression is going to be the exact same for all 4 of these schedule actions, right? That doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the scheduled date. And then the final action here is to save the scheduled ID. This is a text value to the reminder record. Remember, we have this field here under reminder, the scheduled ID. This is important because if you need to cancel a reminder, you need to reference the ID so that Bubble actually knows which workflow to not run anymore. In fact, if you go over to your logs and then to the scheduler and click on show, you're going to see all of the reminders that have been scheduled to go out in the future, and Bubble generates these IDs automatically for you. So this is really the value that we're saving to those reminder records. If we go to our app data over here to reminders, you see we have those scheduled IDs there. Okay, so this is more of an admin view if you need to cancel things from an admin perspective. And then having the record here allows the users to trigger things on their own. Okay, so back to our backend workflow again, that final action is to update the reminder record, whether it is a new or the existing. This is that same consolidated expression. And then we're going to, again, another consolidation here, save the ID coming from either the result of step 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, because only one of those will run because it's only one reminder type at a time. So we'll take the result of step 3, defaulting to the result of step 4, defaulting to the result of step 5, defaulting to result of step 6. Defaulting means if the expression before it is empty, it goes on to the next value, right? So if we do have something for step 3, that's it. Nothing else that comes after will affect it. If we don't have anything for step 3, if this is empty, then it will fall back on or default to result of step 4. If there's nothing there, and it moves down the chain, right, until it hits a value. So this way we save that ID properly to that reminder record. Now, coming back into the page workflow, how do we trigger a change to a reminder? Well, really the only thing is if the user changes the due date of a task. And that's going to happen with the date and time picker. So if the date time picker is not empty, right, it's changed and it's not empty, and the parent group's tasks list of reminders has an item, right? So we know that we've enabled something, then we immediately know that we have to modify them, okay? Whether it's one or if it's all 4. Again, this is coming from the date picker in our repeating group of tasks here. So what this is going to do is first cancel all scheduled reminders, right? Because they're no longer accurate anymore because the due date has changed. So this is an action that you can find under custom events. Cancel a list of scheduled API workflows. And we're going to just go to the parent group's tasks list of reminders related scheduled IDs. All of those IDs will be sent in here in a comma separated list. And that's it. That's all that bubble needs in order to know which ones to cancel. And then, because we are changing it to a new date, we need to reschedule those reminders so that the emails go out at the right time. So this is the same schedule API workflow. This is now on a list, okay, versus when we enable something for the first time on one type at a time. This is actually going to just run on all reminders that are currently set up for the task. Okay, so you can go to custom events, schedule API workflow on a list. All right, and so the type of things is reminder. This is our type of list. The actual list is the tasks list of reminders. It's the field there, that list field. We're going to run our update reminder API workflow. We want it to happen right now. This is just the scheduling that we want to happen right now. And here are those three parameters again, and notice that now we are passing in a reminder. This is an existing record. Okay, so the reminder type is whatever the reminder type is currently. That part's not changing. And then the task is the parent group's task, and the reminder is, whichever one in this list. So if there's 4 reminders set up already, each run, it'll be 4 runs total, but each run will have a different reminder record being referenced. And then it goes through that backend workflow all over again. Steps 1 and 2 will not be created or updated in any way because the reminder is already there. It's already added to the task. Really, the only thing that happens in that case is rescheduling the email, right? Steps 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then updating that schedule ID because it's a brand new scheduling at the reminder level. All right, now back in our page workflows here, one final function is if the user decides to toggle off a specific reminder type for that already exists for the task. Okay, so the condition is just the opposite from our green workflow here. If the reminders, the pop-ups tasks list of reminders types already contains the cell's type, then we know that we're going to be removing it. So the first action is to cancel that one reminder. Again, you can find this under custom events, cancel the scheduled API workflow. This is for a single workflow, and that's what we're using here. We have to find the right workflow ID. So we're going to go to the tasks list of reminders and then filter it by the type. There should only be one per task. And then go to the first item's scheduled ID. That will identify it properly. So it'll cancel it. And then we can also delete the reminder record altogether. If they're toggling it off, there's really no need to have the reminder record in the database. So again, we'll go to the list of reminders from the task, filter it by the type, and then go to the first record that returns. There should only be one. And that record is completely deleted. So it's fully disabled. There's nothing hanging around in the database, nothing scheduled in the scheduled workflow queue, that Bubble has over here. It's as if the user never enabled it in the first place. It keeps it nice and clean. All right, I hope this was a helpful walkthrough for building out a task manager system in your Bubble application. And if it was, take a look at the content you're about to see on the next screen. It's going to help you take things even further.